Let's get on the road. Hello, everybody out there in the tubes of the internet. It is 11-ish Mountain Time, right on the dot. So it means that it is time yet again for another exciting edition of This Week in Space. Hello, good people. Come on in, take a load off, sit back, relax, and let your weekly wizard tell you about everything that's going down in the celestial spheres. Good morning, Jesse Brown. It's nice to see you. Good morning. Come on in. Welcome, my friends. Before we kick off this week's exciting edition of This Week in Space, I just want to let folks know that the Healing Waters or the Dreaming Waters retreat in Epidavros, Greece has been sold out, which is awesome. I hope to see somebody from this out there. That'll be awesome. And if you weren't able to sign up and you really wanted to, I really hope that it goes really well and we'll be able to do it again. So I will keep you all informed. And yeah, I'm looking forward to that. But now I don't have to announce it anymore. So we can just jump into the astrology. I guess I also want to say that my name is Joan Emerson Bell. I'm a tarot reader, astrologer, and licensed mental health counselor. I'm available for tarot and astrology readings. You can find me on my website at campwizardcamp.com or DM me in the Instagram if you are so inclined and hit me up and we can find a time to set you up with a reading if that's something that you are interested in. I also have a Patreon, and Patreon is a great way to support this ongoing and ever evolving process. You can find me on Patreon /Camp Wizard Camp, and I do astrology reading, or excuse me, I do guided meditations for the new moon, tarot readings for the full moon. Sometimes I have a weekly astrology themed radio show called the Melee Report, which I release on Patreon first. Taking a bit of a hiatus from that so I can have a summer break, but I've been gathering music and I have a full folder full of great astrology songs that I'll be bringing back post haste as soon as the summer winds down. Anywho, let's talk about this week in space. We're looking at August the 18th through August the 24th. And we're kicking it off with a transit that is occurring on August the 19th. That would be a Tuesday. We have the Sun in Leo trining Chiron in Aries. This is happening at 26 degrees and 59 arc minutes of these fire signs. Excuse me. All right. So, y'all ready for this? With this aspect, Chiron trine the Sun, or Sun trine Chiron, if you will, uh, we can think about the relationship between our vulnerability and our identity, because I think that those things are pretty entwined. You can consider how the places that we feel tender, the places that we feel vulnerable, can support who we are and how we show up in the world. Check it out. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you really needed to say something or do something, and you were afraid to say it or do it because of the potential that it would leave you too exposed, too vulnerable? And consider the times when you actually did say or do that thing, even though it felt really scary, and how those times may have really helped you to come into a better connection with who you are. Saying or doing the thing that felt authentic, even though it felt vulnerable or scary, may have helped you to understand yourself just a little bit better. And through that, it may have helped to support your sense of identity in the world. Like, whoa, I can do this. Or, oh, I said that thing and it was really scary, but I'm okay. I didn't die. And actually, the other person responded to that in a way that really helped me to come into a better alignment with who I want myself to be or who I truly am. And this is how the Sun and Chiron function, or a supportive transit like a trine can function. It's about leaning into the places of vulnerability because they support our authenticity. Chiron is known as the wounded healer, and it's through knowing our wounds that we are able to work on developing the remedy for what ails us. And we begin to heal, as we begin to heal ourselves, we can also help other people who are dealing with similar issues and support them on their own healing journeys. With the Sun Chiron trine, we can open to how our past injuries have helped to shape who we are today and how we show up in the world, and the ways that we have worked on alleviating our pain or remediating these wounds can both reveal who we are as well as our path. And as we do this work to acknowledge the wound and the places where we're feeling kind of grimy, and we begin to move through these in safe and supportive ways, it helps us to be who we truly are. And it helps us to show up as who we can be in the world. So check this out. Chiron's orbit moves between Saturn and Uranus. So they sort of form a bridge between the conservative nature of Saturn and the revolutionary energy of Uranus. Chiron holds both of these worlds, the old and the new, the old structure or old story, and then the radical new perspective that liberates us from tradition. As Chiron forms this supportive trine to the sun, we are given the opportunity to witness the old stories and forms which have supported us and kind of shaped who we've become. Some of these may be helpful in allow have may have been helpful in allowing us to survive through really difficult situations. These stories or core beliefs may have provided a scaffolding that helped structure our sense of self. However, as time moves on and we change, we may have outgrown some of these old narratives, which may have kept us safe, but have also kept us small. Whoops. Chiron trine the sun can help us to notice some of the places where we have suppressed ourselves or even abandoned ourselves to keep ourselves safe, or even to stay alive through times of great adversity and difficulty. However, the mind will find something that worked in the past and just cling to it and keep doing it. The mind's like, yeah, that worked once, so I'm locked in. We're just doing this. This is how we do things from now on, even though circumstances may have changed. And because change is difficult and often incredibly painful, uh, we tend to stick to that, and we tend to cling to what we know rather than being open to the change or the possibility of something else. Even what is waiting on the other side of that change is much better than the low level suffering we are experiencing on the regular. We tend to stay locked into what we know over what could be, or the difficulty that change requires to step into something new and leave behind kind of the old patterns or the old ways that we know how to do life. Chiron trine the sun helps us to witness both the wound that created our scaffolding as well as the stories we are living by. And we get the opportunity to ask ourselves, is this actually in alignment with who I am or who I'm meant to be? These old thought forms are like scabs or scar tissue that protect the wound, but also constrict the space around the places we've been hurt. With this transit, we can practice addressing the wounded places in safe and supporting ways. And we can find ways of reworking this healing process so that we don't just cover up the pain points or hide them away, but we can kind of allow them to sit in the sun and air out a little bit. Doesn't that sound nice? The sun is a symbol of visibility. Things in relationship to the sun can be seen. They are illuminated. With this trine, there's the call to bring the wounded places into the light so it can be seen and addressed. I've heard it said that secrets make us sick. And if that's true, then this transit is a call to move some of the things that we hold shame around, the places of low self-esteem, stories of unworthiness, or beliefs around being too much or not enough or unlovable, or feeling powerless, out into the sun so they can be cleared in the light of day. And we can find some liberation from the old containers that may have kept us safe at one point, but might be preventing the growth that we are needing now. The sun is like some spiritual bleach. It disinfects and heals the things that sit molding in these shadow parts of ourselves, which is kind of gross. And I'm not saying to just like dump everything out today and just let the chips fall where they may. You need to know what you're ready for and what actually needs to change and evolve to both support you and help you grow. And we want to do this slowly and safely. The old ideas and stories that have been developing for a long time were there for a really good reason. They're protecting us, and they're protecting us from feeling too vulnerable, too exposed, from experiencing pain or being re-traumatized, and that's super important. However, we want to kind of discern what might not be serving me anymore and what might be adjusted, what might be shifted a little bit so that I can feel in better alignment with who I am and not living by this old story that tells me that I'm unlovable or I'm not enough. The ideas and stories that we hold on to have been developed for a really good reason. And we want to be tender with ourselves and honor the parts of ourselves that have been really hurt in the past. But we want to see what's ready to come into the light of the sun so it can be seen clearly. We can ask ourselves, is this story actually appropriate for who I am now and the life that I'm trying to live? Now that I see this in the light of a clear blue morning, is there a different story that I can tell? Or a more expansive container that I can create that can help me grow into who I want to be instead of keeping me in the form of the person that I once was? Is there a felt sense of safety that can help support this change? And what medicine is available to me in this moment, this week, that can allow this change and help calm the places that hold old feelings of hurt and disappointment? That medicine may be connection with others, with nature, with pets, with current relationships, maybe school or books or other forms of learning. Chiron is also the wise teacher and the teacher of heroes, besides just being the wounded healer, which I think is a story that is too small of a box for the dynamic mythological figure that Chiron is. That medicine may even be the recognition that you're in a different place now with more resources than the past version of yourself who may have felt powerless or confused and had to develop these coping strategies just to get by. And in the light of the sun, we can get a bit more clarity and can ask ourselves, what's different now? What's different at this time? What resources do I have available to me that can help me to shift out of this old narrative and create a story that feels a little bit better? And what else can I try that might help me to feel a bit more safe with who I am now and who I am growing into? One last note on this Chiron trine the sun. Besides the wounded healer, which again I think is kind of too narrow a perspective for Chiron, Chiron was also the teacher of heroes. And Chiron can teach us how to be heroic. And to me, being heroic means facing our dragons and facing our demons in order to receive the elixir of life and to share that elixir with our community. And this is the story of the hero's journey. The sun is a heroic figure. The sun is heroic as fuck. It's the heroic archetype. The sun rises each day to shine life-giving energy into the world, and it sets each night to traverse the underworld and battle the shadowy forces of the dark. Chiron trine the sun can help us to access that heroic quality in ourselves, the ability to face our shadows and demons and dragons, to wake the sleeping princess or rescue Zelda or bring the ring to Mount Doom and toss it into the fire. Through the quest or the hero's journey, we are able to come into a better understanding of who we are and how we can radiate those qualities into the world around us, just like the sun. But this begins with us having the willingness to look at the places that live in the shadows and keep us small. It requires us to be able to face these demons or dragons or beasts or shadows, however you want to conceptualize that, in order to come to terms with them and reintegrate them. We don't want to necessarily slay them, even though that might be a helpful idea for some. But what we really want to do is welcome them in and reintegrate them because there's a lot of power there. And there are things that can be necessary for our growth. And I'll talk about this more when we get to the Virgo archetype. But the idea is to sort of be able to meet these things and not shy away from them, but to welcome them in and reintegrate them. And this is how healing happens. And this is how the heroic is formed. Moving on to Friday, August the 22nd, We have the sun entering the mutable earth sign of Virgo. Hold on one second. Um, Astrology by Moonlight said, I went to my 30th high school reunion on Saturday and it was quite healing around my Chiron and Aries. Sounds like I, uh, Oh, and healing some stuff around the body and old stories. And I think, going to a high school reunion, that sounds terrifying to me. And I commend your heroic ability to show up and face these shadows of high school because I think that's a really traumatic time for a lot of people. And that's a time that a lot of these initiating stories get formed around who we are. There's a lot of wounds that happen through the social environment, the Lockean social environment of high school, and being able to lean into that and address that and be like, oh, I am not that person anymore. There is a through line from me back then to who I am now, but I've grown in all these ways and developed all these resources, and maybe I can heal some of these old stories. And one of the things that I think about a lot is going back to the places that we have been, the places that we have inhabited, and the parts of ourselves that get splintered off through difficult situations, through trauma, through just the course of life, and these parts of ourselves that are still living in our past. That are still living and haunting the halls of our high school, that are still living in the past relationships or the cities that we used to inhabit and going back to these places in a different and more empowered form with more resources, with more connections, and calling these pieces that have been splintered off back to ourselves and reintegrating them. And I think this is a really powerful piece of the healing journey. Thanks for mentioning that astrology by moonlight because I think that's a very heroic quest to go and face our past selves at our high school reunion. And you are more brave than I am. I'll tell you that. Okay, so coming back to the astrology of the moment, or actually later this week on Friday, August the 22nd, we have the sun entering the mutable earth sign of Virgo. All right. So Virgo is associated with the archetype of the Virgin, which means something much different today than it did when the ancient Greeks assigned that title to the constellation and the archetype of Virgo. Now, virgin means one who has not been sexually initiated. And it sort of sets up a strange duality between ideas of purity and corruption. However, in ancient Greece, a virgin was a woman who was self-possessed. They were unmarried, and thus they were not the property of anyone else, not a husband, not a family, not a father. The ancient concept of the virgin was somebody who operated through a connection with the self rather than being tied to anyone else. And they were able to choose their own path and kind of create their own destiny instead of being directed through external conditions or connections or conforming to external demands. This virginal quality, in the traditional sense, requires a deep connection with oneself, and it calls us back to the inner sanctum of the self in order to tune in into and maintain the thread of our inner wisdom and to keep and this deep knowing. This requires a process of discernment and devotion, which are both qualities of the Virgo archetype. Virgo is also associated with this idea of the priestess or the priest, the process of rituals that bring the unseen into physical manifestation. And this is the relationship between the polarity of Virgo and Pisces. Pisces is a sign of ephemeral spirituality, the sort of everything, the divine, the complete picture, the big picture. And Virgo seeks to create systemized practices that bring that spirit into the physical world, this ephemeral spiritual energy, this deep transcendental knowing into physical reality. Virgo is interested in the routines and rituals of life. And it's through the daily practice of living that we create the space for the divine to enter into our everyday lives. Virgo reminds us that every day that we wake up and place our feet on the floor, we are entering into the ceremony of life. And Virgo also reminds us that our daily practices and the routines of life can be rituals which call forth the spirit into the world. I've heard it said that where attention goes, energy flows. Virgo, which is ruled by Mercury, is about analysis, discrimination, and discernment. It refines our attention or whatever it touches. It brings it into its highest possible form. When out of balance, Virgo can show up as a bit of a perfectionist, which maybe is given the sign a bad name in some of the pop culture astrology. Has anyone ever heard that? Especially you Virgos out there. Oh, I'm such a perfectionist. I'm a Virgo. Nothing's ever good enough for me because I'm such a Virgo. Let me put it to you this way. Virgo is not about perfection, but it's about perfecting. It is refining and polishing and trying to bring whatever it lays its attention on into its most refined and exalted form. I think that Virgo also reminds us to both witness and accept the perfection in how things are, to accept what could be perceived as imperfections in all things. This moment, as messy as it is perfect just the way it is. Although Virgo is trying to refine things so that they can reach their highest form, they're also interested in gathering facts about the world that can be systematized and applied in practical ways. In order to do this, Virgo is an observer who is on a fact finding mission. And this is the mercurial rulership. And I think that there is a humility in this, a recognition that what we touch, we change. So Virgo holds a duality between the desire to improve what we are in relationship to and the need to observe and witness the world in order to see how things function and work or don't function, as the case may be. It's in the places where things become dysfunctional that Virgo really wants to step in and organize and edit and refine. And it's through observing how things work that we're able to see how systems can be improved. Virgo is service oriented, and a way that we can be of service is to notice problems and create solutions. And we want to keep this right sized because there's sort of nothing worse than somebody running in when they haven't been asked and being like, oh, I'm just going to reorder your kitchen. Oh, this is what you need. Oh, I know what you need. So, and I think that this is the observational quality and the humility of being able to sort of ask, can I be of service? Can I help you with this? Instead of assuming that we know what other people need. And thank you, Gina Maria. Gina Maria is saying, I'm a recovering Virgo. I'm enough. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are enough. But Virgo is looking for better ways to do things and to create systems that really function well. It analyzes the data that it pulls in from the world, and it uses its powers of discrimination and discernment to understand the world and to help things to be their best. However, with all the organization and the attention to detail, there's a flip side. With order, there is always chaos. This is the world that we live in. We live in a world of duality. We're seeking to sort of blend that duality into a secret third thing, which is my favorite. I love a secret third thing. Yeah. And so, think about like a pristine house. Have you ever been to somebody's house and just everything is like so refined and orderly? But there's always like a closet or a basement or an attic where all the extra stuff is shoved. The chaos that gets pushed under the bed or swept under the rug. And I think this is a really important part of the archetype as well. It's important to embrace the chaos and messiness because there is perfection in this too. And if we can't see that, maybe we need to expand our definition of perfection. And this comes back to the idea of purity and corruption. The mess is not corrupt or impure, it's just another part of the pattern and a necessary part of the pattern. I've heard it said that weavers who create Persian rugs will intentionally leave an imperfection in their creation. And as I understand it, the idea is that perfection belongs to God and is not like this divine perfection belongs to the divine and to the gods and is not of this earth. And so we want to remain humble before God. And so we allow imperfections into our work to show that we are not trying to rival the divine. Instead, we honor the world that we live in by acknowledging that here there are flaws in the execution between the Piscean vision and the reality, where we are governed by 16ths of an inch and 30 seconds of an inch, and things get messy and sloppy. And the act of creation is inherently messy, and we live in a chaotic world. And all of these things are also beautiful and part of the larger weaving that we are also part of. And it's good to remember that. Sometimes perfection is too rigid and too sterile. And sometimes it's good to embrace the mess because life is born out of chaos. So, as the sun enters Virgo on Friday, maybe you want to remember this mantra: God bless this mess. Maybe you can embroider it if you would like to. So, also Friday, August the 22nd, Venus in Cancer squares Chiron retrograde in Aries at 26 degrees and 55 minutes. This, my friends, is a very Virgo week and a very Chiron week. We're also getting the new moon in Virgo, which is happening late Friday night, early Saturday morning. So this Venus in Chiron in Cancer square Chiron retrograde in Aries is also a part of the new moon chart. So this aspect, the Venus square Chiron, can bring up issues related to core wounds around relationships. So we just got this boost of being heroic, working on healing our wounds to come into our authentic self, and then Venus will square Chiron, and it will bring up attachment wounds and relational wounds and activate attachment issues. And it can bring up some of these relational wounds from our past. And this often goes back to our relationship with our caretakers, which is where these patterns in early stories may have developed around how our needs are addressed and the strategies that we have developed for asking for and receiving love. These early patterns tend to be recreated in the other relationships throughout our lives until we have new experiences which show us that it's all right for us to do things differently. And so, to think about how we can bring in some of that, the healing that we may have experienced a little earlier in the week around our core identity and this sense, like Gina Maria is saying, that I am enough, into the places where we might be feeling a little grimy in our relationships or noticing old relational stories coming up, so that we can do things differently and hopefully feel safe enough for us to give and receive love in new ways. This transit may bring up a heightened sense of awkwardness or discomfort around our appearance or inhabiting our bodies. Venus rules aesthetics and beauty, and a hard aspect to Chiron can bring up some body issues, beauty issues, make us feel uncomfortable in our earthly forms, and can make us feel a little awkward in about our appearance or inhabiting our bodies, as well as being able to acknowledge or owning our need for connection and our needs for relationship, because human beings are relational beings. We need each other. We need community. We are hardwired for attachment. And this is going to be different for everybody, this transit, based on how it may be impacting your natal chart, and where Chiron is in the sky in relation to your natal chart, and what how this aspect is hitting your personal natal chart. It also, is going to be different for everybody based on our personal history, our attachment styles, and the patterns that we have developed through our previous relationships, including our relationship with our caregivers and our intimate and interpersonal relationships. Again, Chiron is known as the wounded healer. Again, too small of a box, but for our purposes, this will do. And Chiron experienced early abandonment, and they're abandoned by both their father and their mother. Saturn, Kronos being Chiron's father, who left as soon as he impregnated Chiron's mother, the nymph Philyra, who, when Chiron was born, was like, I can't do this, and turned herself into a tree. And so they experienced this really early attachment wound, early abandonment, which caused them to learn and grow into a healer and a teacher. It was the core wound of abandonment which motivated them to develop their skill in order to find connection and acceptance. They were also able to they also received an incurable wound from an arrow tipped with the poison blood of the Hydra, which has no cure. And Chiron is immortal, so they couldn't die. The second wound motivated Chiron to search far and wide for modalities or remedies to alleviate his suffering and to heal this wound. However, these wounds might not actually have a cure, and that's okay. Don't get dismayed by that. The antidote to the wound may be the way in which they cause us to slow down and examine the places that need our attention. And when confronted with the wound, we get the opportunity to develop a new pattern and ways of behaving and relating to ourselves and others. And again, this wound may never go away. It always may be activated through relationship, but how we deal with that activation can change. And it can turn from a place that makes us small and retract or cut things off into a place where we're more available for connection, where we're able to lean into vulnerability so that we can have more intimacy. And it may help us to develop systems of trust to allow ourselves to be open and vulnerable so that we can have more intimacy, so that we can have deeper relationships. The wounds that Chiron reveals also provide motivation for change. As we accept the wounded places in ourselves and practice ways of supporting ourselves, we are more capable of supporting others, which actually makes a relationship much better. This transit calls the sort of grimy feelings around relationship and beauty and body to the surface so that they can be addressed and cleared. These things that are sort of hiding in the dark, like I was saying, in the underworld. As they move to the surface and bubble up a little bit, if we can step back and regulate ourselves, we can kind of like gather them up and examine them and maybe let them go. And then in their place, think about we can develop a new story or begin initiating a new pattern. And we can do this through being honest with ourselves and others and naming and talking about what's coming up for us. We can do this through writing or journaling. Right? The sun has just moved into Virgo, which is Mercury ruled, and Mercury loves writing. We can do this through creative practice. Venus deals with art and creativity. And so, you may want to make art about what's coming up or just dance it out. These are ways of being able to sort of clear these old grimy stories and create new space for something new to emerge and a new pattern to arise. And as Chiron comes into this 10th square with Venus, who deals with beauty, love, relationships, sexuality, sensuality, and values, we may find that our relational wounds get triggered, or we may be called to look at core wounds around self-perception and self-esteem, as well as wounds that we may carry around our value system. And when I think about values, I think about what I like and what I don't like, what we are attracted to and what we are repulsed by, what we choose to draw in and what we choose to push away. The wounds that impact this Venus part of our psyche can cause us to abandon our values in order to find connection and acceptance. We may ignore our inner knowing and say yes to things that don't feel right. And when we do this, it causes a wound. However, the drive for connection is so strong that humans will oftentimes abandon themselves in order to fit in or be liked or be accepted or to receive love. Venus square to Chiron may bring these injuries to the surface and cause us to look at the ways we have compromised our values in order to stay safe or to find connection or to feel accepted. So this square may activate some of our wounds around our needs in relationship, as well as the ways that we have abandoned ourselves to be able to be in relationship. We may find ourselves feeling awkward around acknowledging or expressing our needs, especially for those folks who learned that it wasn't okay to have needs in their family of origin, or folks that may have been shamed or rejected for having needs, or told that they were too much if they expressed their needs. In situations like this, when our needs are ignored or shamed, people learn to just not have them and be very self-reliant. And this creates a wound because we all have needs. We have fundamental needs to be seen and to be in connection. We have physical and emotional needs. And these needs are important and incredibly valuable. And if we feel like we can't express them, or even worse, that when we do express them, we are ignored or shamed, we learn to suppress them. And this creates and exacerbates the wound. In Freudian psychology, there's this concept called repetition compulsion, where we engage in the same behaviors or patterns repeatedly, hoping that they will have a different outcome, or that they will be able to, by doing it again and again, or with this person, will be able to heal that core wound from the past. An individual may play out old patterns developed with caregivers through later relationships, hoping to fix or change something with that core relationship with the caregiver. So there's this unconscious drive that says, if I can just fix my current partner or get them to love me in the way that I wasn't loved by a parent or whatever, that will fix my relationship with that caregiver. However, this strategy doesn't really work. It just reactivates the core relational wound over and over again because we're doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Because no current experience can heal the past in that way. And no current relationship is going to fix our past relationships. And oftentimes, what happens is we pick people just as unavailable as the people who created the core wound in the first place. So we end up engaging in the same cycle again and again and again while expecting different results and basically just rewounding ourselves. And this doesn't heal our wounds, it just constantly reactivates them, which in turn can create stories that tell us that we aren't good enough or that we are unlovable and it will never work. The only way to heal these patterns is to begin to recognize them and break the cycles by engaging in new behaviors, by doing something differently, by witnessing, oh, this is that thing. What else can I do? What structures or resources can I gather around me that will allow me to feel safe enough to begin to do things in a different way, to try and ask for and receive love in a different way, to try and give love in a different way. And so this is something to think about as Venus comes into square Chiron, and these things may come to the surface. Oh, why didn't they love me? Oh, I am too much. Oh, I'm not enough. How can we step back and witness and notice and sort of hold that again into the sun and see, oh, this is what this is. This is where that came from. What can I do differently? You know, can I be tender with that place? Can I acknowledge that place and not ignore it and try and cover it over or try and fix it through relating with somebody else? But can I sit with it? And is there a way that I can do this differently? Is there a way that I can be tender to this wounded part of myself that really just wants love, that wants connection? And can I reorient my way of asking for that, or trying to receive that, or giving that in order to do things differently and to develop another pattern? But this requires the heroic quality coming from the sun trine Chiron that allows us to really look at these tender places and to be soft with them and to be compassionate with them and to be compassionate with ourselves instead of replicating the core wound of being like, you're not enough, or that's too much, or like, shut up. I can't deal with this right now. If we can sort of reverse that and be tender with these things and show ourselves the love and care that we were looking for from early caregivers, from relationships, and instead of seeking for somebody else to do that for us, if we can do that for ourselves, that can open the path to healing. Which moves us on to Saturday, August the 23rd, and the new moon in Virgo, which is occurring at double aught 23 minutes. Yeah, 0 degrees, 23 minutes. And so this new moon occurs late Friday, August the 22nd. For those folks on the West Coast, it will be the new moon will be exact at 11:06 p.m. on Friday the 22nd on the West Coast, and early Saturday morning on the East Coast. On the Saturday the 23rd, it'll be occurring at 2:06 a.m. That's Eastern time. So back into Virgo territory. And kind of interesting to note, I don't use modern rulerships. I tend to the more traditional rulership, but in modern astrology, there is an idea that Chiron is the modern ruler of Virgo, which is not that's not a system that I necessarily adhere to, but it's an interesting thing to think about. And so, as we're talking about all this Chiron energy this week, as we're talking about the sun entering Virgo and then the Virgo new moon, we can also think about what Chiron's relationship to Virgo might be. And I'll let you all sit with that yourselves. But Virgo is a mutable earth sign. It stands with 1 foot in the summer and 1 foot in the fall. As such, it is a sign that's associated with the shifting of seasons and the harvest. In the harvest, we choose what to keep and what to discard, what fruits or grains to be picked and eaten and stored for the winter, and what's left on the vine to seed the fields for the next growing season. And when something is harvested, Virgo uses their power of refinement to process it. So what is inedible waste is discarded, and we're only left with what provides the most nutrients and flavor. The archetype of Virgo brings with them the energy of analysis, discernment, and refinement. So as we are harvesting what we have been growing and begin moving into the fall, this is a time of wrapping up the processes that we have been engaged in since the solstice or even the spring equinox. And we are harvesting what we have gathered from the summer and deciding what's worth keeping with us and bringing into the next season, and what has served its purpose and thus can be left in the fields to help fertilize whatever comes next. So as we move from summer into fall, there's a maturation that occurs. In the summer, there's this abundance of light and food is freely available and the living is easy. Maybe not so much this summer, but the idea of summer, the form of summer, it is thought of as a time of ease. And as the world turns, we move into autumn, things become a bit more challenging. There's increasingly less light, and there's the need to prepare ourselves to survive the winter. And this requires maturity and acceptance of the death and the darkness that comes with the winter. One of the myths that is associated with the archetype of Virgo is the story of Demeter and Persephone. Persephone is abducted by Pluto and dragged into the underworld. Previous to this, Demeter had tried to protect Persephone and keep her safe and locked in a child phase, naive and free from danger or trouble or worry. And this never works. And Pluto's abduction of Persephone allows her to integrate the shadow aspects, like we've been talking about, so that she is able to come into her full power instead of projecting those aspects of death and destruction outward, projecting the shadow outward into the external world. She is able to own these attributes and come to terms with them because they live in all of us. They live in the world. Just like the summer must learn to come to terms with the winter. We must learn to mature through fall and gather and keep what we need to help us to survive the time with less light and less available resource. So with Virgo, we are learning to mature from the youthful naivete of the summer into a place where we have more access to power through accepting the reality of the underworld as personified through the change of the seasons. So a new moon is a time of planting seeds, which is a strange thought because I just said all this stuff about harvesting, which seems like the opposite end of the cycle. But With the Virgo new moon, we are planting seeds of refinement. What have we gathered thus far? And what do we want to keep with us? What do we want to polish so it can shine its brightest? This is a time of editing and analyzing to discern what's most valuable and how what we choose to take with us can be used in the service of those around us, the world, and ultimately the spirit of life. This is a time of letting go and shedding, as well as deciding what can be of use and helping that to come into form so it can be put to a practical application. The sign of Virgo is associated with the Greek goddess of Straya or Dike. This, this is the goddess who presided over the Golden Age and was a symbol of justice. And this wasn't human justice, mind you, but more like divine order. This goddess loved humanity so much and had the utmost faith in our inner divinity. However, as humans became more and more corrupt and began to forget the old gods, and the gods began to leave the earth and return to Olympus at the end of the Golden Age, Estrella held out hope that humans would remember the old ways and return to their connection with the gods and the earth and abandon our low down selfish ways. Estrella was the last to leave the earth as the Golden Age ended. And when she did, she was pissed. She felt really betrayed and finally left the earth and retreated into her new home in the stars. And forever after, she harshly judged humans. And nothing we did from that moment forward was ever good enough for her and was never good enough to kind of heal that wound of betrayal that she felt. And this myth tracks with some of the critical tendencies of the Virgo archetype. When it's out of balance, Virgo can hold people or things to impossible expectations. And this is, again, because Virgo wants to refine things until they are at their best. But if we lose sight of the inherent perfection of how things are, we can get caught up in a story that nothing is ever good enough. And that's a painful story to be living out. And so with this new moon, I examine some of these ideas of purity and impurity. While Virgo seeks to refine and perfect, we can also consider what might be lost if things become overly sterilized. How bioregions and microbiomes can be lost if they are scrubbed clean and overly organized. We want to remember to leave space for the mess and the unpredictability of life because these are the places that life incubates within. We don't want to overlay our human ideas of order onto systems that are much more vast than what we can comprehend. It's the desire to order everything that gives rise to the American aesthetic of strip malls and box stores selling homogeneous products that are infinitely reproducible, where you can get the same exact mocha frappuccino at every single location across this great land. And this is Persephone going into the underworld and coming to terms with the chaos that lives in the dark just below the surface of the ordinary world. And the ordinary abundance of life and youth. And this is the divine order that Estrella holds, both the order and the chaos. And so with this new moon, it might be helpful to tap into both of these qualities in ourselves and to open to a bigger sense of order than what we may be able to perceive from our limited human perspective. Because it may have been the first sterilized American strip mall that signaled the end of the Golden Age and caused Estrella to retreat back into the cosmos. However, even though that age has passed away, we carry it in our genetic memory. And as we open to the possibility of bigger notions of perfection and embrace the sense of divine justice, it can help us to decide what is worth holding and refining so we can be of service to the spirit of life and justice, and what has run its course and can be discarded to the compost heap to help generate new life in the future. Which brings us to Sunday, August the 24th. We have the Sun in Virgo squaring Uranus in Gemini. This will be occurring at 1 degree and 23 minutes. And, this is happening right after the new moon. So the new moon is also in orb of a pretty tight orb to this square to Uranus as well. And I'll just talk about it in terms of the Sun squaring Uranus to, not to do things to death. So, hold on one second. The sun represents our sense of self and our identity, as well as our inner spiritual wisdom and what we aspire towards. The goal of the sun is to bring that inner wisdom into alignment with our sense of self and our identity, which, we've just been healing throughout the week. So this is great. Just as the sun radiates its life into the cosmos, the sun in our chart radiates our sense of self into the world. However, that sense of self is always evolving and changing. The stories that we tell about ourselves are based, again, on early childhood experiences, families of origin, reflections from other people that we interact with, and the relationships that we are mirrored by, as well as the media, myths, images, and everything that we are consuming. This is informing our sense of self and who I should be or who I can be in the world. And somewhere in all of this information, we create an ego identity, a sense of I, me, this idea that I am separate from other beings and other people. Uranus is a planet that deals with liberation, freedom, breaking away from old forms and formulas and structures. When this archetype of disruption and change comes into aspect with our sense of self, or that core narrative that we have been constructing that helps us to understand who we are as separate entities from everything else, we might be asked to reconsider some of the aspects of the stories that we are telling ourselves. We may need to shift some of the things around how we show up, how we do what we do, or even how we believe ourselves to be. Uranus is looking for authenticity and total liberation. It won't be satisfied with any half measures. Oranos, god of the sky, uh, was kind of famous for pushing his children back into the womb of Gaia, the earth, and who is his wife, because none of the sky god's children were good enough for him, for his ideal, his perfected ideal of how things should be. He's a sky god. He lives very far away, and he had all these children. He was like, oh, no, I'm not raising that. No, that's gross. He pushed them back into Gaia's womb. Gaia was not very happy about that. His children failed to reach the perfection that he envisioned for his offspring, which caused him to force them back into the earth where they couldn't be seen. And I think that the planet Uranus, or the archetype of Uranus, carries the sense of idealism with them. It's seeking for the perfected vision. If it's not the best, then I don't want it. The sun in the Mercury ruled sign of Virgo, which we talked about earlier, right? One of the characteristics of this mutable earth sign is the drive for perfection. This oftentimes is mistaken for perfectionism, like I said. However, again, it's this process of continually refining. The idea is to bring things to their highest possible quality. The sun in Virgo wants to illuminate the best in something instead of rejecting it and just pushing it away. How do we hold space for what it can be instead of being like, that's not good enough, get out of here? So in this in this square to Uranus, which is a hard aspect, means that the sun and Uranus are in this tense relationship, and there's friction here, and friction creates change. It also seeks integration. The tension between our solar identity in the sign that is working to refine and perfect the sense of self, and Uranus, the disruptor and liberator who seeks to tear down outdated structures and which is always striving to attain the idealized vision that lives beyond the constraints of the real. As we move through this tense energy, the stories that we have constructed about ourselves and who we are may need to change. They may need to be adjusted. Our sense of self may be questioned, or we may find ourselves in situations, routines, or structures that no longer serve us or feel too constricting or small. We may be faced with the question to stay in our comfort zone and endure, or to create change in order to create more space. And again, this is really scary because the mind is like, this thing worked once, I'm doing this forever, lock the fuck in, got this, And Uranus comes around and it's like, yo, bro, that's too small for you. You might you might need to like think about doing something else. What would it be like if we flipped it over? What would it be like if we expanded it a little bit? What would it be like if we painted it blue? Or what would it be like if we came into a better alignment with what feels truly authentic? What is brewing deep in the center of the sun, in the center of our heart? So we may find a deeper desire for freedom this week and during this new moon as we are choosing what to refine and what to shed. Or we may notice the places where we are feeling restricted and confined. The downside of this combination of Uranus and the Sun is in Virgo is this tense aspect may make us believe that we are not good enough. And again, this is just a story, and the story is probably based on old relational wounds. Or, as we begin to notice this tense aspect between the sun and Uranus may set us on a course where we are striving for something unattainable because it lives in the ideal, far beyond the realm of the practical. And so, learning how to hold both things. This is the ideal that I'm striving for, and this is the reality that I'm living in. And both of these can be true. And I think as we hold the idealized vision, that gives us an orientation point that we can move towards. But if we abandon the practical or the workable for something eternally intangible, especially when it comes to our sense of self and how we show up in the world, it can be not that helpful. Uranus square to the sun asks the question, do you believe in what you are doing? With this transit, we are asked to really examine who we are and what we are doing in the world and how we are showing up, and consider what shifts we may need to make in order to be in better alignment with that inner wisdom of the sun. Uranus wants to tear down or blow up anything that feels inauthentic, anything that doesn't reach that idealized vision or stands in the way of our authentic expression. And this is not an easy feeling, my friends. Uranus can be too much, too fast, too soon, which can be really dysregulating. It may cause parts of ourselves that have been protected by the stories that we have constructed or the routines that we have built around ourselves to keep us safe. It may cause these parts to become exposed, and that can feel very vulnerable and difficult. Although Uranus may mean well, oh, you should just be free, bam, you're free. We may find ourselves being challenged by external events or inner psychic energy, which may reveal some discomfort and vulnerability. And real talk, no one really wants to change because change is difficult and scary. And when we're thrust into a change point, like Uranus square the sun, we're oftentimes asked to reckon with some of the uncomfortable information that we have been holding on to. We may be asked to choose between the comfort we have created and the inner need to grow. Comfort is great for integration, but it's difficult to grow in our comfort zones. Change is exciting, but it can be incredibly destabilizing to be suddenly forced to question who you are and what you are doing. And so, again, creating safety, creating resources around ourselves as we move through this new moon and move towards the end of the week. And it can be really challenging when external events force us to force us into situations where we need to change and grow. So we can ask ourselves, how can I best lean into this change process and create space for growth while still holding on to a sense of myself, which helps to support this process? And of course, sense of self is really key for stability and ego identity. But how can we allow that sense of self to be updated without being torn down, to be gentle with ourselves as we allow ourselves to evolve? And how can we leave space for the insight and inner wisdom that help us to recognize where we may have strayed from our path so we can come back into a sense of alignment with that inner wisdom of the sun? And how can we learn to radiate that inner knowing into the world through our external presentation and our works and deeds? And again, the sun in Virgo wants to be of service. And really, how can the need for change and liberation that Uranus brings help our inner and outer worlds to come into harmony so we can be more truly ourselves? What might need to be shed or shucked or culled in order for this process to come to fruition? and the gold that the sun offers be harvested, refined, and shared. And with that, my friends, I bid you a great week in space. Go forth and be merry. Be well out there. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate y'all. Again, I do this every Monday at 11-ish Mountain Time, making that whatever time 11-ish is, wherever you find yourself. Yeah, and I like talking about astrology. I like talking about space, and I really appreciate when people tune in. And if you like this, I don't know, like, follow, share, let other people know. Or, if you want to do it by word of mouth and just tell them the nuggets that you have gleaned from this, or if you want to let folks know so that they can tune in themselves. And I don't know, I like to do this, and I do this for no monetary gain. I do this because this is my act of service, and this is what I've been called to do, at least for about an hour at 11-ish Mountain Time every Monday. But, I'd like it to get to whoever it can help. So if you can help in that process, I appreciate that. So yeah, spread the word. And if you are curious about your natal chart or going through a change point or a transition and you would like some support, I'm available for tarot and astrology readings. I also do astrologically based coaching. You can find me on my website, campwizardcamp.com, or you can DM me on the Instagram. And yeah, that's all the astro weather that is fit to print, my friends. I appreciate y'all for tuning in and lending me your valuable and precious attention for this short little bit. I will see you all next week. Same wizard time, same wizard channel. And until then, be good to yourselves, be good to each other, and as always, may the force be with you. I'll see you all next time. Bye now.